Hi there, this is Making Baby Food. I'm Jocelyn, and today we're going to be experimenting with squash and rice. So, what are some of the benefits of squash? All varieties of squash are a good source of magnesium, calcium, iron, vitamins A and B6, protein, and fiber. Also, squash are grown locally. They're a traditional food for the Haudenosaunee people and many other indigenous groups. They are easy to grow yourself, so you can try growing some in the backyard even from the seeds you find inside your squash today. And they stay fresh for a long time, so it's a great food to have on hand. Squash is a great baby food on its own, especially if baby is around 5 months old, 6 months old, and is just starting to eat those more textured solids. But we also wanted to introduce the idea of using rice with baby as well. I would start introducing rice around 6 months and afterwards. Rice is a really easy baby food. Since it's so small, it's really not a choking hazard. Also, typically, rice is very inexpensive and easy to prepare. However, rice is also very fibrous, so it can cause baby to become constipated. So if your baby is prone to constipation, I would maybe not use rice at that time. And whenever baby is eating solids after the age of 6 months old, they can also have some water. So feel free to give them a little bit of water with all the meals, and that can help with digestive issues. You may have heard of the BRAT diet. The BRAT diet is used when people have stomach illnesses causing diarrhea and vomiting. If baby over the age of 6 months old has a stomach virus, you can try feeding them these foods to help their digestion. That's bananas, rice, apples or applesauce, and toast. Alright, let's get cooking. So first thing we're going to do is preheat the oven to 400 degrees to roast the squash. And to roast the squash, we're just going to cut it in half and remove all of the seeds and the guts or strings. I realized I wasn't going to eat both halves of this squash today, so I just wrapped one up and put that in the fridge so I can eat it another time. Once you have removed all of the seeds and strings, you can add a little bit of oil and just use a brush or your fingers to add a little bit of oil all over the squash. Now use your knife to make small holes all over the squash, or you can also use a fork, anything to make little vent holes, which will help the squash cook more evenly in the oven. Cook your squash face down on a lined baking sheet for about 45 minutes. While your squash is cooking, you can make your rice. So to make rice, you always need to use twice as much water as there is rice. You add both the rice and the water immediately to a saucepan. So if you're making half a cup of rice, you use 1 cup of water and bring that to a rapid boil. Once it starts really boiling, turn off the heat, put on a cover, and let it sit for about 20 minutes. Now that your spaghetti squash has had a chance to cool down a little bit, use a fork or 2 forks to get all of the little strands out. So you just use your fork lengthwise and keep making little indentations, and it should be like spaghetti noodles. That's why they call it spaghetti squash. And that's great because that's already such a good size for baby. You don't have to use a blender or a masher or anything like that. Both my spaghetti squash and my rice are ready. I'm going to show a few different options for what you can use these for baby. So in my first one, I'm just going to mix up some spaghetti squash and some rice, and then use some of my kitchen scissors to cut that spaghetti squash into very small pieces. So this would be for our early eaters, our 6 months olds, who are, experimenting with some different foods, but still don't have those teeth for chewing or harder gums for chewing up larger strands. So we're just going to cut those into little pieces. And please feel free to let baby experiment with this with their fingers. So let them get in there and try to bring some food from the bowl to their mouth. And yeah, it's going to get pretty messy. A lot of babies will eat just in a diaper, or you can put down a tablecloth underneath them to collect all of those little pieces that they drop. But it is really good for their development and for their food experience, for them to be allowed to feel the food and experiment with it that way. My second option is going to be the larger pieces of spaghetti squash in one part and then the rice in another part. You can try giving them a spoon so they can get that from their bowl to their mouth. And I'm putting the rice separately because when you put the rice together like that, it will kind of harden a little, so the baby can get larger clumps of it compared to when it's mixed in with the spaghetti squash. It has a looser consistency. And my third option is really just the large strands of spaghetti squash on its own, because spaghetti squash is such a nutritious food. You don't have to use rice with it. If your baby is prone to constipation, you really don't want to be adding more rice to their diet. Please feel free to give them this wonderful, flavorful vegetable by itself, because it really has so many benefits for a baby in their physical health right now. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Making Baby Food. I hope you enjoyed this, and please feel free to reach out with any suggestions in the future. Bye now. And just in case baby doesn't eat an entire spaghetti squash on their own, I included this screenshot of a recipe for a simple dish for spaghetti squash. So I hope you enjoy that as well.